Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Empower LEP Podcast. I'm your host, Jana Parker, licensed educational psychologist, group practice owner, and mentor at Empower LEP. Today, I host Dr. Jack Naglieri. Jack has a long history of practicing school psychology, researching, publishing, teaching, creating tests and products for our field, and giving workshops and trainings. I have always appreciated his transparency, his candor, and his curiosity. I'm starting this conversation from the beginning when we got on the call rather than when we officially started the podcast because I appreciate the authenticity of our conversation even before the camera was quote unquote rolling. So what you hear us discuss is all of the planning that took place ahead of time, which is next to none. And I'm just loving what comes out of these times of connection and inspiration. As always, I hope you enjoy this conversation as much as I did.
Hey there.
Hi.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. Thanks for being on my podcast.
I'm happy to do that.
Yeah.
Happy to see that you've branched out and you're doing something of very different and I would argue very important.
Yeah, I'm doing a lot of different things. Yeah, one is running my practice. I have 10 employees now.
Oh,
So yeah, I have 5 other licensed educational psychologists. And then I have a speech and language pathologist. I have an academic tutor and then a special educator who does a lot of transition and executive function work with, she also does some academic work too, but yeah. So, and then I have a full-time admin and yeah, it's great. And so that I'm just totally loving. And then I'm leading the Empower LEP group site, whatever, it's like a resource for people who are just considering different roads in California. We have a license through our Board of Behavioral Sciences where we can work in private practice, which is amazing. And so that, there are a lot of people, I think it's becoming more popular these days to think about venturing outside of the school system, whether that be working for a group practice, having your own little thing going on, or just even just what else can you do? I mean, I think people are getting into ed tech and there's a lot going on social media with just people sharing information and just like all these different resources and AI and, there's lots of different things. And so I'm really interested in people's stories and how they got to where they are and, just to kind of think outside the box or, I think there's it's really easy to stay like in a school system, but I think a lot of people are feeling like an itch, especially as they get maybe like mid-career and are thinking like, what else? And even if they still stay in the schools, like there's just more, and so I'm interested in how people get to where they are in these new places and different routes that they took. And one of the things that, like we go way back. And one of the things I really admire about you is that you're just like always curious. And that was what I think it's been maybe 8 or 9 years that I've known you now. I couldn't remember if it was 2016 or 17 that I met you at NASP, but it was really that, just sitting in your talk and just hearing that, like, just like asking questions about like why we do the things that we do. And, I love that. So, yeah, so I thought you'd be a great person to interview because I really want to know like why you've done the things that you've done kind of career wise, like what inspired you to, to get into school psychology in the first place? How did you make decisions about where your professional life was going to go? Like, I want to know like that kind of story, because I think it all comes from like this inner passion and drive to ask questions and figure things out, and live your purpose. So.
and why do I nearly 15 years after I retired from the university, why am I still doing this?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How do you make those kinds of decisions? How do you get into, you know, like, how do you know where your money is going to come from? How do you do it all, and why? Yeah. So this might be a little bit of a different, a different topic for you. You do so much talking on your work, but I don't know that people ask you these questions all the time. I'm hopeful that maybe they don't, and I get an exclusive Dr. Jack Naglieri. So what do you think? Where do you want to start?
I'm very comfortable with this question. It's no surprise that you know that Kathleen has a big influence on me.
Yeah.
And, she's been harassing me pretty much since we met with the why question.
Yeah.
Like, enough already with the question. But
it's important.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I actually talk about my personal journey to the next generation of intelligence tests now. And I start with not really all the way at the beginning, but a beginning as a school psychologist. But there's more to tell before that I don't usually talk about, but I do occasionally.
All right. Well, let's hear it.
Anyway, but first tell me, what is this entity that you have? Do you have a collection of podcasts and such like that?
Yeah. It's called the Empower LEP Podcast. And I've been interviewing people who have made a shift from educational, or like from school psychology into private practice. Some have a solo practice, some have non-public agencies, where they're running, like a whole thing. Some are specializing in behavior, some are specializing in counseling. And then just people who have done something totally different, like, people who are doing a lot of training or AI, or have a big social media presence to bring people together to talk about different things in special education or with kids. So I'm really interested in hearing how different people are getting to where they are and what inspired them in terms of like content and psychology, and where they found their inspiration, and also what it's like to be an entrepreneur or use your skills in a way other than what you maybe originally thought that you were going to do in a school system. How do people go from thinking like, I'm going to work in the schools for 30 years to like, whoa, maybe I'm not going to work in the schools for 30 years. Why? And what else can I do? And what inspires me? Because I think as we go through our profession, we find that we have interests that we sometimes get to really develop as we're in schools. And other times we find that maybe we need to look beyond that. And again, whether that means we are fully leaving to do something different, whether it be teaching or test publishing or writing, or publishing books, or doing research, or having a practice and being a speaker and I think that in this day and age, with how fast technology has gone over the past several years, things have really opened up, like people are going like, oh, there's this, like, what else, not that we want to take all the school psychologists out of schools, because we certainly don't want to do that. We need them, tremendously, but there are other things that help to allow us to use our gifts, I think, in the ways that we're meant to as individuals in this world for the time that we're here. And I'm interested in why people are doing the things they're doing and how they're making it work, because I think a lot of people are also afraid of leaving a stable system, you know?
Yeah. So do you have a list of questions already?
They're in my head for you. Yeah, you're a little different.
Okay, so we have an hour to do this, that's the
Yeah.
plan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, you want me to start? I mean, they're in my head. The whole purpose is I kind of want you to just like talk off the cuff because you're pretty good at that.
Yeah. I may want to end in a special way, though.
You can end in a special way. Yeah,
I have to get my guitar to end.
I would love that. Yeah.
Well, we'll hold that for when we get to the end.
Yeah, well, I'd love that because the last talk I saw you at NASP, we couldn't get the sound to work.
Yeah,
So,
okay,
yeah.
all right.
So,
Does my sound sound okay? I'm using a different microphone.
yeah, it sounds
Okay.
okay. You just have
Okay.
to make sure that your voice, that you don't lose your voice.
I won't listen to this. I'm gonna turn my phone off too, so it doesn't interrupt us.
Okay.
And will somebody manage the video, clean it up and stuff like that?
We don't usually clean up the video. We usually just kind of go with it. Although if something happens and we need to, we can. Yeah. If
Because
you're like,
usually when I do this kind of thing, I have, like on my YouTube channel, there's a lot of videos. I have my assistant clean it up and make it look nice.
I do have the ability to do that. I just, so far I've gone with the candid mode. Yeah. And this is on like YouTube and it's also just on audio.
Okay, so it will be visual as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
You look great.
so I need to change my shirt or anything?
No, you good. Yeah.
Is my hair okay?
Your hair's okay. Yeah.
2 hairs I have left.
You're looking good. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah. So yeah, I guess we'll start here. Welcome to the Empower LEP podcast. Dr. Jack Naglieri, thank you for joining me.
it's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks. Yeah, we go way back. So it's nice to have like this hour with you where we can kind of catch up and hear about your story as you've evolved through the field of school psychology and beyond. So
Yes, I guess it probably was maybe a good 7 or 8 years ago when we first met, when you attended the sessions that my wife Kathleen and I did on past theory, cognitive assessment system and learning.
yeah, I actually attended NASP before then and met you. And then I was like, I need to go to it was Learning in the Brain, right? It was Learning in the Brain conference. It was in Santa Barbara and I took my resource specialist.
Yes.
And yeah, that was really great because we had the whole, we had the teacher and the ed psych marriage, literally.
Yeah.
And it was like that was an ideal world. And I brought my resource teacher and it was great.
Yeah, it's terrific. And you distinguished yourself then as you continue to do so.
Thank you.
Nice.
Thank you. Doing my best. So yeah.
How can I help?
Okay. Well, I would love to hear kind of the story of how you got to where you are in the field today, why you continue to be curious, ask questions, kind of like hold people to the fire. You know what I mean? Like I've always really respected that. It's hard to do in this day and age, because there's a lot that goes on in the field. And I think more I know about it, the more I realize that like there are a lot of like different influences on why certain things happen the way that they do. And I've always appreciated that you continue to ask the hard questions. And I encourage people in the field to do that, you know? So yeah, I want to know from you kind of where the inspiration has come from for you and how you have made decisions in your professional career that have like how you've made the professional decisions to do the things that you've done, both for the sake of like growth and development in the field, but also your own personal business/entrepreneurial decisions, because this podcast is for people who are thinking about moving outside of a system in whatever way they want, you know, whatever way that is for them. But how do you make decisions about being anywhere outside of a school system, you know? So I would love to hear from both sides. And we can start at the beginning of you like getting into school psychology.
Yeah, so I actually became interested in human learning in my first profession, which was as a teacher of guitar to the local kids in the neighborhood. And I remembered that I used the same book and the same instruction with everybody. And some kids really got it and some kids didn't. And I was really curious about that. Why? Why can Tommy do really well and Brian not do very well? And I would ask them, how much did you practice, and so on and so forth. When I went to undergraduate, I didn't really know what I wanted to be, but psychology really resonated to me because whether it's animal learning or human learning, it's all about acquisition of knowledge and so on. So I really resonated to that. And I actually had, I think, a really good undergraduate psychology background with professors who were emphasis on cognitive, emphasis on history, emphasis on Freudian psychology, emphasis on Skinnerian psychology. I had it all. And I remember being really intrigued with all these different views. And it was actually my psychology teacher who was actually a Kleinian, which is like for a psychodynamic approach, who had the most influence on me. And the way that came about was I was looking to get into a master's program, and I asked him for a letter of recommendation. And he said to me, I'm going to dictate it. You write it down and have it typed out, and I'll sign it. And when he started talking, I was thinking, who is he talking about? It can't be me. He later told me that he and another professor who I also worked with, who was a cognitive guy, they thought that if anyone was going to make it in psychology, that I would be one of those people. And I was really shocked about all of that, because that wasn't my experience in high school and such. And that was really the beginning. And then I got into a school psychology program, and I finished that up and started working as a school psychologist. And I remember so vividly wondering, why does the WISC have information similarities, arithmetic, and my achievement test have information similarities in arithmetic and vocabulary in both?
Yeah.
And I remembered thinking, that's weird.
Yeah,
Doesn't feel right.
right.
So I worked for a couple of years, quit my job. People thought I was crazy to go to University of Georgia to get my PhD.
Okay.
Keep
Huh.
in mind that I was a professional musician working 5 nights a week to get enough money to go to school. And I experienced what I would call a bias against me. When I interviewed for a doctoral program on Long Island at a very well-known university by a well-known school psychology director, who said to me, without knowing anything about my background, we looked at your GRE scores. We use that as a measure of intelligence. We don't think you're smart enough to get a PhD. Says this at my interview. Well, I've been around. I worked in the music industry. I'm like, I won't even say the things I was thinking because it'd be bleeped out. And I didn't go there, of course. But I saw that woman at every NASP I've attended and presented at for decades thereafter. And then I was making the intelligence test that she inappropriately, I would argued I wasn't smart enough to get.
Yeah.
She did the same thing that we do all the time when we give a WISC or a WJ or differential ability scales and some of the KBC as well, where we measure intelligence by evaluating how much knowledge a person has. And this, I think, is a fundamental failure of our entire profession of relying on instrumentation that's built not really on a theory, not with a clear image of what needs to be measured, and so on. And so for me, when I got my PhD under Alan Kaufman, started working out in Arizona, I saw a lot of that firsthand, testing Native American kids, writing articles about, Native American children who have verbal scores in the 80s and hundreds on the so-called nonverbal, we call the performance scales of the original WISC, and how absurd that was. And so I wrote my first paper on equity in 1983. And I've been doing it ever since because it's just wrong what we're doing.
Let me ask you,
And people get upset with me, and that's okay, but I have a lot of evidence that what I'm saying is right.
yeah. Well, I mean, one thing I really appreciate being in private practice has been, because I've been doing it now, well over 10 years, is the flexibility we have in really taking a process-oriented approach. And I didn't feel like I could be as flexible in the work that I was doing in schools, although I did start to shift that practice, as you well know, because I met you on my tail end of being a school psychologist. But I really appreciate that, because I think that there is so much more to the scores, whatever test you're giving, right? And that's actually what I do my best to train school psychologists on, kind of in general, like when I'm training at CASP and NASC now, is really about not just what the scores are telling you, again, like regardless of the tests that you're giving, but like how they're getting to that and what you can understand about how they're doing that, I think gives you just a lot more information. Some districts have this test or that test, and they all give us information, but it's really the observational data that we get from watching that process and asking them about the process, which is something that you recommend, when you're giving the cast too. So that's always really resonated with me.
So my evolution as a test author came about when I was a student at the University of Georgia, and when Alan Kaufman made an announcement in his class that he was going to build a new intelligence test, and would anyone want to help? And I'd never done that before, but I said, I'll help. And Alan never taught us how to make a test, never even discussed it. He just said, here's my vision. And the funny thing that happened was I started getting ideas, and I'd come in a couple of ideas every week, and Alan would just look at them and say, this is really good. Where did you get this? I said, I don't know, I just thought of it.
Yeah.
And so I think it was 5 or 6 of the original subtests on the KBC I created. Many of them were never done before. Even some of the ones that were really great, that we both really liked and worked really well, but were too expensive to include in a test kit. Some of those are still in my cabinet over here. But one day Alan came to me and he said, I can't find anybody to write a matrices test, progressive matrices test. And I didn't really know what the heck he was talking about, but he said, will you try it? And I said, yeah, sure. So he gave me the Ravens matrices. I took it home and I looked at it and go, this really is crappy. It's horrible graphics. The colors are terrible. But he had his own vision of what he wanted. He wanted all the items to be solvable with the same 6 little chips, which was interesting. I thought that was an interesting challenge. That meant I had to write, I don't know, 40 or 50 items, and they all had to be answerable with one of those 5 chips. And I did it. And it was a lot of fun, but I didn't like it. Then when I was at, then I went to Northern Arizona for a couple of years. I did some research on the KBC when I was there. But when I got to Ohio State, about a year, actually just about a year, my first year there, I met a guy who was in charge of test development at Charles Merrill, which ultimately would be purchased by then Psychological Corporation, now Pearson. And I met him at a party. And I pretty much said, hi, I'm Jack Naglieri. I wrote a lot of the KBC. I want to come and talk to you. And that's what happened.
Yeah.
And I said, I want to do a matrices test. So he said, okay, that sounds good. So go make them. So now this is early 80s. There's no computer generated. I created templates and did everything with colored pencils and drew it all out with meticulous detail because it was going to be rendered by an artist and then photographed and brought into the publishing. That was the path. And so I did. I wrote a whole bunch of items, and I had a couple of rules. First rule was color. I used blue, yellow, and black and white. I didn't use, actually not really white, but white paper. I chose those colors because those are the colors that people with impaired color vision can manage. And I had this rule that when you look at it, it should be interesting to look at. And at the time, my daughter Andrea, who's now 42, was like about 6 or so. And sometimes it would take me an hour or two to render an item. And I'd show it to her and I'd say, Andrea, how do you like this? And she goes, no, yuppie, Dad. And I would toss it and start over because I wanted it to be interesting. And then the next thing that occurred that was really pivotal for me, like my professor at the university who wrote my letter of recommendation for me, there was a man there, his name is Daryl Sabers. He's an amazing psychometrician. And Tom Hutchinson, the guy who was in charge at the company there at the time, brought Daryl in to be the psychometrician to help us manage these products. And Daryl told Tom, after he looked at my items, that those were the best items he'd ever seen. So that kind of support from people I don't know in an environment where they're not going to just say that because, because if the items suck, they're not going to move ahead with me and sign a contract and publish a test.
Yeah.
So, these were pivotal moments where I got some kind of sense. So yeah, I did it for the Calvins, and I know that my tests were good because they were on the KBC.
Right.
And they were ultimately published, and kids' lives were influenced by that. But now I could do it for myself.
Right. Question.
Yeah.
When this is just like a logistical question, but when you're doing this kind of work, when you're thinking like, okay, first I'm in Arizona, then I meet this guy. So what I'm hearing you say is like there was a lot of networking going on, or meeting the right people at the right time, or being in the right places, or making sure that you went and talked to the people who you knew that there would be some kind of connection. And then I'm also hearing that, like, how do you make a decision to go from Arizona over to Ohio, and then you're in Ohio, and like, are you getting paid to do any of this work, or is this like you're doing it in the hope, kind of like a songwriter, like you're doing it in the hope that you are going to get signed, like
Good
how does
question.
that work?
So of course I was in Arizona for 2 years, and it wasn't the right place for me. And they brought me in because they wanted a researcher, but it was only the chair of the department who wanted the researcher. The rest of the professors liked skiing and doing other things that I won't mention.
Got it.
So I realized this isn't going to work. And there was a job at Ohio State, and I just applied for it and got it.
Yeah. Okay.
And that's when I did so much of my research and also my test development. But a door can open, but you got to walk through it.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I go back to my musical background, dealing with an industry that's extremely unkind to young people. And I've worked with a lot of really scary people.
Mm-hmm.
So when someone gives me shit at the university, I'm like, I've got a lot worse than this.
Yeah. I completely understand that, because my dad was in the music industry. That was his entire career. So I understand like how awful people can be. I understand how you have to just like put yourself out there, and you got to just like, roll with the punches and take them as they come and keep going. And it takes a lot of tenacity and grit to push through that.
Yeah. And when I wound up in the office of a CEO of a very large publishing company, which I won't tell you what it was, and the attorney for the company was there, and they were trying to push me around, I just said, no. And they looked at me really funny. I said, no. Because I've been in worse situations than
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And it's not easy being a test author. There's so many complexities to it, and I recently moved, and I came across the document that had the first money I earned from royalty years after I started producing these tests. And it was like, I don't know, $300 or something like that, I, you know, I remember my accountant saying, Jack, if you don't start making more money, they're gonna say your test development is a hobby and they won't let you deduct anything.
Okay, so to answer my original question, you're saying like you did do a lot of this like work up front, really like, I mean, you were a professor at Ohio State, so you're getting paid for that, but this other project, that's just like you're building it and hoping if you build it, they will come. And if they come, you're gonna see the results of that far later. So it's a very like, you got to have a lot of goal-directed persistence for that.
Yeah, and I was very intentional about this. I remember so vividly having lunch with one of my colleagues from the psychology department who was making a lot of money doing private work. And I wasn't making any money developing tests because it takes forever. And we had this discussion, money now or money later? And obviously I opted for the long term.
Yeah.
And it is a long term. It takes a long time. And I have like something like 50 products out there now. And that takes literally years and years just to do one. Cognitive assessment system was a little more than a dozen years to go from beginning to publication. Just think about working on something that complicated.
Yeah.
That difficult to do. The first time an intelligence test built from a specific theory based upon the brain from the ground up. That's what JP and I did.
Yeah.
That was damn hard.
Yeah.
We made so many tests that we eventually just tossed because they didn't work, or they worked, but they didn't work in the way we wanted them to. Refining and refining and refining. We spent so many years doing research on the tests before they were actually published.
Yeah.
And then since the CAS and now with the CAS 2, the amount of research we have on the CAS is amazing for its support, but it takes a long time, forever, seems like, So how many years has it been since we started in 1984? A long time.
Yeah. That is a really long time. So, okay. So you get into test publishing and you're still working as a professor. Did you ever do work, like did your universities have like a place that you were ever doing any more like direct testing with kids, or was it kind of related to the tests that you were developing? Like what did your life look like as you're going through this, like
3 jobs.
Yeah.
University, test development, and speaking to promote the tests.
Right.
3 jobs.
Yeah.
3 jobs for 30 years.
Yeah.
Pretty much, that's not an exaggeration.
Yeah. No, I understand. And actually, I think it's a running theme through a lot of the people who I've been interviewing is how many jobs we all have, and how much I don't know, there's something about this field where we're just like love working. Because there's just like never, like it never stops, it's a field that we just continue to like learn and evolve and grow if we can stay open,
If we choose to.
Right.
Some of my colleagues who just retire and disappear. And I think, well, that wasn't what I wanted to do. I mean, I did my 30 years of university. And then when I turned 60, I said, I don't really need to do this anymore. I'm going to just focus on my tests instead. And I've been able to do that. But again, it took a lot of years to be able to get to that point.
Yeah.
So the university was getting in the way, didn't like that I had a successful career as a test author, petty jealousies and all that kind of silly stuff. But eventually I was just like, peace out, I'm done.
Yeah. Well, did you go to different universities throughout your professional career after
Northern
Ohio?
Arizona,
Mm-hmm.
Ohio State, George Mason.
Okay.
That was it.
And then you do that to, so you have a retirement from that system.
Right, that was an important piece because I could get my health care from Ohio State teacher's retirement when I turned 60. That was a key.
Yeah.
And I was done with Mason. I was just done with them. They were just being obnoxious.
So did you go back to Ohio?
No, we stayed in Virginia.
Okay.
And now we left Virginia and in Maryland. We're in Annapolis by the water.
Got it. Okay. Yeah. I mean,
We're big sailors, Kathy.
yes. Yes. That's great. Yeah. So now that's like now part of your everyday or
Oh, yes,
next.
especially in summer.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even in winter, we can always find a boat someplace else.
Wow. Yeah. Yes, that's true. Yeah. So, okay. So you worked in a system so that you could get your, make sure you had retirement, and you were doing kind of your passion on the side, but not on the side. It was like probably a front runner for you. And you still to this day give a lot of trainings and talks about your work, and you've done work with Kathleen. Do you do that still because you love it? Do you do it because, I mean, there's always like new topics coming out too, like over the past many years that I've heard you speak, there's been a lot of like shifts in changes, but what's been, I think, really cool is that you were already kind of focused on where the rest of the world is catching up to.
Equity is a good example, right?
Right.
I've been writing and talking about equity since 1983.
Yeah.
Think about that. Now equity is a big deal. I've been doing it. But I want to share something that I think is very important.
Yeah.
I have a personal philosophy about being a test author. And I think its origin is my insistence that if I'm going to say to a person, I have this idea, I created this tool, here's how you should use it, I have an obligation to that person that there's science behind what I say.
Mm-hmm.
And so as a test author, I think you have to be a researcher as well. So as you know, because you've heard me speak, I talk about the science. And if I say my test is more equitable, I show you 15 studies and where my test is on the equity scale and so on. And we talk about the science of equity and fairness. And I show the evidence, whether it's that or whether it's my work with gifted kids or with the autism scale or the executive function scale and so on and so forth. I feel that I have a personal responsibility to everyone who listens to me, not just to say what I think, but show what I've been able to find out and conclude.
Mm-hmm.
And provide the citations. You can go and look at them and see if I did it right or not if you want. I think that's critically important because our field is out of control. It is absolutely out of control with everybody writing books and promoting interpretation of every test ever published based upon what they think those tests measure, which I find offensive, quite honestly. whether it's, my review of the WISC-5, that's in Alan Kaufman's book, where I talk about how whoever wrote the WISC-5 manual, certainly not David Wexler, they list over 100 abilities that the WISC measures. I think that's absolutely irresponsible. And other people who write books, big, thick books without validity chapters.
Yeah.
Our field has gone crazy. Why has it gone crazy? Because people are desperately trying to figure out, how can we make these old tests give us new information?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the more research you look at, especially as it relates to this concept of interpretation beyond the full scale, Gary Canavay, McGill, and all those guys who've done the bifactor analyses and all that kind of stuff, and they found that all of these tests but one, all the intelligence tests that we know about, except for one, should only be interpreted at the full scale level because the parts don't have enough specific variance. And of course, the only one that's exception, according to Gary Canavay and a new paper that just has been submitted for publication, is the gas is the only one. Not at the subtest level, at the PASS level. And I know obviously I know everybody, right?
Yeah.
I know they're doing things in good conscience, and I know they believe what they're doing. And I know that they dismiss people like Gary Canavay and Ryan McGill, which I personally think I find that offensive, and because I know these people and I have a lot of confidence in them as scholars, and they have integrity to be able to come out and say, hey, the emperor has no clothes, right? That's a message that people don't want to hear.
Right.
But they have so much research that supports that position that it shouldn't be dismissed. And I see it dismissed all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, we always have this kind of weird thing where, okay, someone could say, well, you're just trying to hawk your test and make more money, And those are the people who don't know anything about me. Because if they ask me why I do this, it's not about money. It's about my commitment to a field that I've been in since 1970 something.
Yeah.
And for me, it's all about the kids. So I'm going to give you an example. My son Jack Jr. asked me, why are you still working? You're retired, aren't you? I said, yeah. Last November, we launched the 3 new gifted tests at the National Association of Gifted Children. These tests rock. They are amazing. I put them on the scale of cognitive assessment system as the best things I've ever done. That's how amazing they are. And already thousands upon thousands of kids have been given the test, and it only got local norms last November. But here's why I keep doing it. I know we're changing kids' lives.
Mm-hmm.
But after one of the presentations that we gave, a gal comes up to me, as you came up to me when we first met, and you had a question, right?
Yep.
Well, she came up to me, I thought she was going to ask me a question, and she did. She said to me, I have to thank you. And I was a little puzzled. I wasn't quite sure what to say next. Like what did I do, And I hesitated, and she said, I have to thank you. I found 8 kids of color for my gifted program that I would not have found if it wasn't for you.
Yeah.
So that's why I do what I do.
Yeah.
Because I know there's thousands and thousands of kids out there who we can help. In the book that I recently published with my 2 colleagues, Dina Bruyas and Kim Lansdowne, we estimate that in the US right now, there's approximately 1.25 million kids of color who are smart enough to be gifted and aren't. Those are the kids that we want to see.
Yeah.
And not just not just the kids of color, but all kids from poverty. Because there's plenty of white kids from poverty who are smart
Mm-hmm.
and need a chance.
I mean, in California, we don't even have like gifted unless they go to private school. Like there's
Yeah.
no gifted program out here, not that I know of. Maybe I'm wrong. But
Yeah, it's really too bad.
it is
Especially,
too bad.
think of all the brilliant kids in any of the impoverished places around the country.
Well, it just makes me like, this is why we're in this field, because like you're talking and I'm thinking like, okay, how do I start a nonprofit where we go into like the school districts and, find the kids and then have like like an enrichment program for kids who qualify, but then that how am I going to figure out how to do that? But that's where my mind goes, right? Like, I feel like
There's actually money at the federal level that would allow school districts to use tests and not have to pay for it to find these kids.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I have
give you
some,
that information.
well, yeah, get me that, because I do work with some school districts and we could work
I'll
that out.
send it to you.
Okay.
I actually met with the folks at the US Department of Ed. They asked me to come in and talk about equitable assessment.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Wow.
yeah.
This is a little bit off topic, but can you pick up your cup that you were just drinking out of? Because I feel like it says CASP on it.
Oh, yeah, it was that CASP one year, so.
Yeah.
I get an assessment system one. I have a couple of different ones.
Well, you're drinking the California Association of School Psychologists one
Yeah.
on this call with me. So CASP representing.
Now, I'll be at CASP this year.
Me too.
Oh, good.
Yeah. Yeah. We just found out that I got approved. Did you just find out were you invited? What are you talking about?
Steve Pfeiffer and I are going to do a talk on dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm expecting to do a talk on gifted kids.
Nice. Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm doing one on academic achievement, like kind of teaching school psychologists about achievement tests, because I feel like they don't know enough about it. And also about building a business as a private psychologist.
Yeah. Well, Steve's tests, I think those are the best. And
Mm-hmm.
I was just going to say something. What was it?
CASP.
Yeah. Oh, if you think about being a professional doing evaluations, it always occurred to me that as a private practitioner, I would want to use the best tool I could get.
Mm-hmm.
And if the school wants me to use the old stuff, I would use the old stuff, but use the stuff that I know really matters.
Yeah.
And I think as a professional, that's a selling point. It's kind of like, anyone who says, hey, we have the latest technology in blah, blah, blah. So you should come to us if you want X, Y, and Z. It always occurred to me that that's how I would look at it. I don't know.
I absolutely do look at it like that. I use what I want, when I want, for who I want, and I have everything at my fingertips that I need so that I can pull what I want, based on what the referral question is and what I'm looking for, and I can pull whatever I need off my shelf when I want to go deeper. Yeah, I love it. I love it. Most of the work that we're doing in my practice is for just parents who want to know what's going on and how to help, which is the best, for me. That's what I love.
Yeah, I agree.
So in terms of, just people stepping outside of what they know in the moment, like people who are thinking about going in different directions with their career as you did, what are some of the things that you would say to people who are considering something different? You know, what are some of the things that are amazing about, or what do you need to do? And then what has been really great about what you've done? What has been really challenging, and what guidance would you give people?
Well, I can tell you one thing. It's really hard to do what I've done. And I don't think a lot of people I don't think it would be a good choice for a lot of people because there's so much involved.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's an intersection of business and science and all these different aspects. It's really hard. If you wanted to do it, you'd really need to have a good background psychometrically. At least you don't have to be a great psychometrician. And I think in some ways that can be a disadvantage because you just look at numbers and you miss the important stuff.
Yeah.
Like what it is you're trying to achieve. But I think if you have a vision, you need to do it cautiously because you don't want to just quit your job and be living in your car, right?
Right.
And so you have to have like a safety. So for me, the safety was university.
Right.
That was like a support for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I could do all the other stuff at nights and weekends, which is what I did.
Yeah.
So there's this balance between how can I survive? I have 3 kids and all that kind of stuff. So it's complicated. But I think probably the best thing I would say is respect the past, but don't be constrained by it.
Mm-hmm. I love that. Yep.
Because if you're constrained by it, you're not going to do anything that's really any different.
Yeah. Even if you're in school, like even just as a school psychologist, and I don't mean just like you're just a school psychologist, but as a school psychologist, it's very easy to get stuck in, what has gone on up until this point, whether it be like the politics, your director, or how things have been done in the past, or what test kits you have at your disposal. Just any of the stuff that is like here doesn't mean that that's the same stuff that has to happen here. I love that. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is to be very strategic, use your planning of frontal lobes to engage a few other people. One of the things that I've been really lucky about is I've had people like JP Das to work with, for example, on the cast. More recently, I've been able to start to build a team that is comprised of school psychologists who are advocating for change, especially in the area of equity. And what happens then is I talk about the science. John Kelly talks about the ethical obligations of school psychologists. And Peter Faustino talks about how you can facilitate change within your district. And having this multi-dimensional examination of the question of equitable assessment is really powerful.
Mm-hmm. Because
it's not just, oh, Naglieri says we should do this because there's all this science stuff. No, John Kelly says you should do it because you have an ethical obligation. And here are the standards, and here's what the standards say, and here's the practice model, and on and on and on and on. And Peter Faustino says, well, how are you going to go about doing that?
Yeah.
Maybe you create a little a little group of a couple of school psychologists who get the pertinent information from Jack's website, take it to the supervisor, have a discussion, maybe ask Jack to talk to everybody, which of course Jack always does, and so on and so forth. To how would you go about doing it? Or listening to Tulio Otero, what Tulio did for many years. Tulio said, my director wouldn't let me give the cast, so I convinced her I'll do a whisk and a cast, and then the teachers just asked for the cast information. They didn't care about the whisk anymore, and then they never give the whisk anymore. You know, these solutions to the problems. So I think that's really important to be able to have a group of people that complement each other, and then together is much more than it's the sum of the parts.
Right, right. Well, yeah, and we each have our areas of kind of expertise. You know, we don't all do everything. So finding those people who can, it just makes it kind of like full circle, like you have all the pieces there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this has been fascinating listening about your life and your story. I would love for you to take us out of here with.
Okay, here's what we're going to do.
Yeah, what are we going to do?
I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to play a video.
Okay.
To give you the context, in 2022, I received the Legends in School Psychology Award from the New York School Psych Association. And John Kelly, who was kind of organizing the whole thing, said, I don't want you to give like a stuffy lecture. I want to interview you. And he did. And you can actually watch the interview. It's on my website. But then he said to me, but Jack, I want you to play guitar. Because when John and Peter and their wives and Kathleen and I go out on my boat, I'm always playing the guitar and all that kind of stuff. And I'm like, no, I don't want to do that. He said, come on. So I thought about it. And then all of a sudden it struck me, I know exactly what I want to do. Because if you think about it, I'm all about change, encouraging people to grow beyond the past, right? So here's what I decided to do. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die. Takes a lot to change. It takes a lot to try. Maybe it's time to let the old ways die.
I love that. Yeah.
So there you have it.
It's
time to let the old ways die.
Yeah. I'm actually gonna talk at NIASP also this year.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
How are you gonna do NIASP and CASP at the same time? They're at the same time.
I'm gonna talk at CASP on Wednesday, and then I'm gonna fly on Thursday, and then I'm gonna talk at NIASP on Friday.
Wow.
Yeah.
You're young, you can do that. I gave up on the 2 conferences in 1 week. Actually, I did it last year and I thought, I don't know why I'm doing this. I don't like it.
Yeah, I've never done it before, but I'm looking forward to it. I'm giving a talk on science of reading-based assessment, basically at NIASP with a colleague who I met at a conference, because I meet everybody at conferences.
Yeah.
Yeah, she was like, I talked to, she was given a talk to school psychologists about, or actually it was at the Learning Disabilities Association. It's Michelle's story. And she was giving a talk on science of reading aligned assessment. And I was like, ooh, I've been doing that too. And so we got together and we did it at NASP, this past NASP. And then I would like to say that I was invited, but I wasn't so much invited, but she was invited to NIASP, but she wanted to do it together. So I'm riding her coattails a bit, but no, she's amazing. She's amazing. And so I'm so super excited to be doing that. I've never spoken at a different state's conference before, so it'll be fun.
Well, just remember, you're gonna hear everybody who talks the same way that I do, the correct way, I would argue, but that's another story.
Well, Jack, thank you so much for this conversation and for being part of the podcast. I always love a chat with you. And I think, again, like just, you're inspirational in a way that just makes you like, just I think it's like, keep your eyes open and stay curious and keep asking questions. And, for the amount that, sometimes people don't like it when people ask too many questions. And I've kind of always been one of those people who's like, wait, but, like, sorry, I have another question, without trying to be super annoying, but we've got to keep asking questions because this world is moving so fast. And I don't, I think it's hard to keep up with everything that's moving. And we want to make sure that we are doing right by the kids that we work with. And I think that I would say that all of us want to believe that we're doing that. But yeah. Well,
Always a
please,
pleasure to see you.
yeah, you too. And say hi to Kathleen. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for listening to the Empower LEP podcast. Episodes can be found at empowerlep.com. If you liked what you heard, please leave a 5-star rating and review on your favorite podcast player. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to connect. I would love to learn more. I can be found at jana@empowerlep.com.